What if the whole world spoke the same language, worked together, and built a tower that reached the heavens? Sounds unstoppable, right? But in the Bible, that plan led to something no one expected: confusion, scattering, and the birth of many languages. This is the story of the Tower of Babel. Now, if you're not familiar with the story of the Tower of Babel, well then let me just jump right into it. In the days following the flood, all people spoke one language and everyone understood the same words. Now these people settled in the land of Shinar, which is also known as Babylonia, and over time they began to grow and multiply. And eventually they decided we need a city, we need a big city, and we should build a tower so tall that its top will reach up to the heavens. And so that's exactly what they did. They started to build this tower, and it was built of burnt bricks, and they used bitumen, that's a kind of tar, to make it into a kind of cement. And they said, let's make a name for ourselves, and let's make sure that we're not scattered across the face of the earth like we were before the flood. You know, we don't want that to happen again. We want to stay together. We want to have a great big city, and we want our tower to reach up into the heavens. So the people are working together, and they're using their ingenuity and their strength. And they were doing great. And it says that they were doing it in a way that no plan of theirs would now be impossible for them to carry out. So they were basically saying, hey, if we can build this tower, what can't we do? We can conquer anything. We can do anything we want to do. If we can build this tower, nothing will be impossible for us. Then one day, God came down from heaven and was looking over the earth, and he looked at this city and the tower that the people were building. And when he looked at them and he saw how they were coming together and working together, and he noticed that with one language, nothing they planned would be impossible for them. That probably sounded good to God, like, oh, my people are speaking one language. They're getting along. They're working together. They're creating something beautiful and great here. But then God looked down at them, and his perspective shifted a little bit. And instead of thinking, oh, this is great, my people are united, instead, he thought, oh, whoa, wait a minute. If they keep going in this direction, if they continue to work together and they have one language, then pretty soon nothing will be impossible for them. They'll be able to conquer anything. They'll be able to build anything. They'll be able to do anything. And that made God a little nervous, a little worried. You see, God created humans to live under him. He created humans to worship him. He created humans to acknowledge him and know that he's God and they're not. And he didn't want them to get so powerful and so strong that they didn't need him anymore, that they were too powerful for him, that they were too strong for him, that they didn't acknowledge him or respect him. Or even worse, God was afraid that they would try to reach up to heaven with their tower, and they would try to take God's place in heaven. Because in the ancient Near East, people believed that the gods lived up in the sky. And so they thought that if they could just build this tower up high enough, maybe they could even meet the gods. Maybe they could go up and live with the gods. Maybe they could become gods themselves. So God looks down and he thinks, wait a minute, I got to do something here. Because if they keep going in this direction, they might just become too powerful and too strong. So God came down. And when he came down, he did something very drastic. He confused their language so that they didn't understand one another anymore, so they all spoke different languages, and they didn't understand one another. The scripture says that at that point the building stopped, and then the people began to scatter themselves across the face of the earth. So they weren't able to stay in one place and build one city and build a tower anymore because they didn't understand each other. Everyone was speaking different languages. No one could understand who was saying what. So the building stopped, and then they all went their separate ways. Now, the place was called Babel because there God confused the language of the whole world. That's where we get the word Babel. And so this story explains why there's so many different languages in the world today. Now, this is an ancient Mesopotamian creation account. Ancient Mesopotamian people created this story to explain why there's different languages in the world today. There's many different versions of this story. This is just the version that we find in the book of Genesis. Now, there's a lot of stuff in Scripture that's hard for us to understand, but when we read this story, I think there's some stuff that we can take away from this and apply it to our lives today. First of all, this story teaches us that God is all-powerful. God is in control, and He still sits on the throne. So when we start to think, oh man, we've got some problems, we've got some issues, and we might even be tempted to think, oh man, the world's gone crazy. Nothing makes sense anymore. People aren't making any sense. Things aren't making any sense. When we read this story, we're reminded that God is in control. God is all-powerful. He's all-knowing. And He has everything under His control. Nothing happens without God. Nothing gets past God. And He is sovereign over every situation. Secondly, this passage teaches us that we should never forget God's sovereignty. That's exactly what those people did in the story. They forgot God. They forgot that God was God. They forgot that He created them. They forgot that they needed Him. They forgot that they depended on Him. And they tried to act like God themselves. They tried to take God's place. They tried to act like they were God. And that's not a good thing for us to do. We have to remember that God is God, and we are not. He's in charge. We're not in charge. He's the king of our life. We're not the kings of our life. And we have to make sure that we always remember that God is God, and we're not. Finally, this story reminds us that unity isn't always a good thing. Now, you might be thinking, Kyle, what do you mean? Unity is always a good thing. We should always strive to come together. We should always strive to be unified. We should never strive to be divided. Well, yes, that's true. But listen to the context here. They were unified. They were unified, they were getting along, they were speaking the same language, they were working together, and they were building something beautiful. But that unity was leading them astray. That unity was leading them to the point where they would try to act like God. So sometimes unity isn't always a good thing. Sometimes we can get so unified and so strong that we begin to act like God, and we begin to think that we're too powerful for God, and we're too strong for God, and we do not need God. So sometimes unity isn't always a good thing. And we have to make sure that we're always relying on God and depending on God and acknowledging God. Even if we're unified, even if we're getting along, even if we're working together, we have to make sure that we always acknowledge God. So those are just a few thoughts that I have on this passage. Do you have any thoughts on this passage? Do you have any thoughts on the Tower of Babel? Why do you think God did what He did? What do you think this passage teaches us? About God? About us? What do you think about this passage? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. We'll be sharing more Bible stories to inspire and encourage you, so stay connected with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Thank you for watching BibleLens.